Bolstering Each Other by Buff Darkow. "Walk with me?" asked my grandma, as she did most evenings. "Sure," I said. It was just dusk when the porch lights and fireflies cheerily blinked in the neighborhood. People talked from porch to porch or on the sidewalk, gossiping and sharing daily news. We walked slowly, my arm through hers, along the cracked and root-raised sidewalk. I had to be careful that she didn't stumble, because if she fell, she might never get up. She had a plate in her leg after breaking her hip many years before. That made Grandma's balance a bit wonky. I was forever afraid that plate would crack inside her thigh and she would never walk again. We only had to travel past 5 houses, each built on their own small city lot as ours. The end of our street met the main thoroughfare of town, and we went no further. The corner store had an ancient wooden screen door that would clack and slam shut as we carefully managed the 3 steps down. The mysteries of that tiny store. Grandma would poke around on her own, looking at the magazines and out-of-town newspapers. I would meander as casually as possible to the candy counter, where all of the delicious choices were organized as sparkly as those fireflies outside. I would stand mesmerized by the colors, shapes, and anticipated tastes of those candies. Finally, a penny, nickel, or a dime would make its way out of my grandma's pocket to the counter. A penny meant bubble gum, a nickel, Necco wafers, and a dime an Eskimo pie. What a wonderful treat on a hot summer's night. Grandma would sometimes buy the Toledo Blade or the Youngstown Vindicator to read at home after she finished the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Cleveland Press. Once in a while, we would need bread or hamburger buns, and she would pick those out after carefully checking to be sure they were fresh. The proprietor would bag up our purchases, and we would set off on the journey back home. Dark had always descended by that time, and I was happy to have hold of Grandma's arm, safety in numbers and all that. No, I really mean that I felt secure and protected by a 75-year-old, nearly crippled woman who was my playmate, my confidant, my teacher of practical knowledge, and my benefactor. I've come to find out recently, as I am near the same age as my grandma was then, that a parent living with their children is not the best situation. Grandma lived with my family of 5 from 1957 to 1969, from when I was 2 to 14 years old. She was another mouth to feed and needed her own bedroom in our cramped 1-bathroom house. She couldn't drive, so we took her to see her friends, to church, and to buy special shoes twice a year to help her balance. I remember Mom and Dad discussing Grandma's situation. I heard the words nursing home more than once. But then my mom would cry and my dad would acquiesce. Thankfully, Grandma would remain in our home, to them perhaps a burden, but to me a treasure. Grandma would meet me at noon every day after my walk home from grade school. I would nibble on homemade cookies while she told me wonderful stories. Why the Sea is Salt, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, 3 Billy Goats Gruff, and Hansel and Gretel. She was all of the voices, including the scratchy, garbled tones of the trolls living under the bridge, and the high-pitched, crackly words of the witch. Some days we would play indoor hot or cold, with my prize being 2 of those chalky, minty pink candies. Grandma always had a few of these delights in her pocket. Those pockets probably held more mysteries than I ever knew. Grandma taught me to play crazy eights while eating black licorice sticks sitting in her bedroom. I was impressed with her fancy hat boxes under the bed, with her silver and ivory brush and comb set, and with the pictures of her smiling, handsome husband. He was a grandpa I never knew, except through her memories. She taught me to knit and to tat, even though her hands were twisted with arthritis. Grandma was fond of our parakeet, Mr. Chips, and had me help clean his cage and feed him. One afternoon, the cat knocked Mr. Chips' cage over, and so went Grandma down to trying to set the cage back up. I rescued both the bird and my grandma and went to bed feeling especially proud of myself that night. Grandma snored, always, loudly, all night. I know my parents were bothered by this nocturnal disruption, but I found it comforting. Grandma went to bed relatively early, and as I was the youngest child, I was always scooted up the stairs way too early for my liking. I was afraid of monsters in the closet and under my bed, and after several evenings of Mom and Dad coming to my bedroom to check for the invaders, I was told to forget such nonsense and go to sleep. Grandma's steady snorting and snuffling, breathing out and in steadily, reassured me that someone was close by, should I need help if the monsters materialize. I had to mature a little bit before I realized how intellectual my grandma was. She read all of those papers and wrote commentary about the news in her journal. She gave talks to her book club, her News of the Week club, and to the Women's Guild at church. She had lived through the advent of the light bulb, indoor plumbing, the automobile, the airplane, the telephone, and finally space travel. She observed the development of these inventions and then their common use. She had many opinions about the way history had progressed. She shared those with her peers, not necessarily with her family. Maybe because she felt a bit beholden to Mom and Dad, maybe because they were too busy to be interested. I was about 10 or 11 when one evening on our walk, Grandma stumbled and almost went down. It was then I admitted my fear of that plate in her thigh cracking or piercing through her skin if it actually broke. Grandma finally realized the truth. I thought the plate was made of fine china or porcelain. Grandma explained that it was made of metal and didn't really ever hurt her. The plate assured her broken bones mended correctly. My relief was palpable when I finally heard this. Grandma resumed her slow shuffle, leaning into me. I anchored my arm to her waist, intertwining my fingers in hers. I matched my gait to hers. I knew we had traveled together way past the corner store, Crazy Eights, and Mr. Chips. We journeyed together for many years, one elderly and worn, one young and eager to learn, bolstering each other.